What do you tell
Mhm.
Spock?
At the beginning of every revolution, there's one man with a vision.
Yeah. So what's the word?
Sore throat.
Sore throat.
Yeah, I've got the driest, sorest throat I've ever had.
What happened?
I don't know. I have no idea. Just have a sore throat. I woke up with a sore throat this morning. Didn't
Yeah.
do anything crazy. Didn't have anything unusual to eat or drink. It's just one of those days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just one of those days. Yeah, it reminds me of a Led Zeppelin song. No idea.
Out with Led Zeppelin.
And see, we were going to make our Led Zeppelin top 10 list, and you can't even think of the Led Zeppelin song I'm thinking of.
No, not that one. Not related to
Getting sick.
Another Day or getting sick.
Yeah, you got allergies, then you get sore throat. Yeah, it reminds me of a specific Led Zeppelin song.
I can't even guess. Is it a line in the song?
No, it's a title of a song.
The title of the song.
Yeah. Have you listened to Physical Graffiti all the way through yet?
Not all the way through. I remember listening to most of it.
Yeah, look at the song titles from Physical Graffiti.
Oh, I got such bad allergies. No, the very last song, Sick Again.
Yeah.
Now you're telling me.
Yeah. I can almost always do that. You say something, I could think of a song title that applies to it.
Yeah.
Or a movie scene. One or the other.
Mm-hmm. One of the two.
Yeah. So anyways, what's happened today in history?
On the 14th of June.
Yeah.
It's a good question. I'm going to be sniffling so much.
Yeah, you must have something last night, man. Did you have some drinks or anything last night?
No.
Oh, really?
No.
Probably just somebody you were around.
Had something.
Yeah.
I'm just looking for seeing if there was anything interesting. Well, there's two.
Well, before you mention something else like that, let's do this first. Who was born on today? Anybody significant?
So there's a long list that they consider significance and everything. Well, that's a famous person who was born today. Che Guevara. He was born today.
Guevara.
The Cuban revolutionary guy.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. I don't know much about him. I mean, I know him. I don't know.
Yeah. Steffi Graf, the tennis player, obviously.
Oh yeah. For a while, yeah, she was. She didn't achieve anything close to what Serena Williams did, though.
Yeah. I mean, she won 22 Grand Slams.
Yeah. How many did Serena Williams win?
If Serena Williams did win more, it wasn't many more. Yeah. Steffi Graf won 32 Grand Slam titles. This is finals. She won 22 Grand Slams. Serena won 23.
Wow, I didn't realize that. Really?
So,
huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember. I remember she was dominant. If I remember my history correctly, Monica Seles was around at that time. But as we know, Monica Seles, she was doing really great, and then she had that incident, and she was never the same after that. It would have been interesting if Monica Seles would have continued on with her career, I think that's one reason why Steffi Graf achieved so much that she did, because I think Monica Seles was going to be that dominant player at that time, or at least it would have been a great rivalry.
Yeah, Graf is 5 years older than Seles, so Seles would have been rising. Yeah.
And how old was
they even say that in the
go ahead.
They say that the general timeline, the following few years saw her remaining the best player in the world, but struggles with injuries and the rise of young rivals, especially Monica Seles. But then after everything that happened to Seles, Graf went on.
Yeah, and how old was Monica Seles when that happened?
She would have been 19, 20.
Yeah, think about that. Think about that. I mean, what a career because she was a heck of a tennis player, man. And then some creep, does what he did, and that totally derailed her career. It's so unfortunate for Monica Seles, but not taking anything away from Steffi Graf, because I think that would have, as far as women's tennis, that would have been a great rivalry for at least for a few years anyways, between the two of them. Yeah, unlike Serena Williams, I don't think Serena Williams, she never really had a real rival throughout her career.
And that's why I remember, because I would argue that Steffi Graf was the better tennis player. I mean, she, it's like they say, I mean, she held the world number one in women's singles for a record 377 weeks, 107 singles titles on the tour.
And
the only tennis player, male or female, to have.
Who are we talking about here again?
Only tennis, Steffi Graf.
Okay, Steffi Graf. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and she's the only tennis player, male or female, to have won each major single titles at least 4 times. So she won a quadruple. She won the Grand Slam 4 times.
Yeah.
So,
well, I would comfortably. Yeah. I didn't realize. I mean, I remember, but I didn't realize that she achieved so much.
Yeah. And she won a gold medal in 1988 singles, representing Western. So.
Wow. I didn't realize that. Yeah, I didn't. I never realized that about Steffi Graf. I knew at her time she was a dominant player.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, because at the point when I was really following tennis, but I remember because Monica Seles just started getting in there. And I don't know. I know they had to have met at least a couple of times. And probably, if I remember right, my Monica Seles beat her.
Yeah, she lost in a semifinal in the French Open one year. And then she beat Seles in Wimbledon. They played a few times. Against each other. And she lost the final in a tour, in Berlin. And she actually lost the final of the French Open to Seles too.
Yeah. Yeah, what a great rivalry that would have been between the two of them. But fate would have it that even Steffi Graf, I think there was a couple other players around, but not at that level. But I didn't realize. So when you're talking about Serena Williams, I thought Serena Williams was just the overall, but man, I'm really surprised.
It's the one thing that annoys me about Serena Williams, because it's the American marketing. Athletes like, oh, she just blew away all the competition. It's like, even here, technically speaking, Serena Williams doesn't even have the most Grand Slam singles titles. She's second.
Yeah.
So There's Margaret Court. I think she played before the Open era began, or something like that. Yeah, she won one more than Serena Williams did. So, yeah, Margaret Court. I always remember her name. I just never remember the stats. She won 24 women's singles titles and a total of 64 major titles, including women's doubles and mixed doubles, which is the most in tennis history. So, yeah, Serena Williams, great player, but everybody that markets her as, oh, she just blew everybody to the side. I mean, in her era, yeah, but it's kind of like this is what we talked about in boxing with some fighters like Roy Jones Jr. or something like that. Where, yeah, there's some respectable fighters along the way, but not to take anything away from what she did in her career, but it's all right.
Yeah. That's news to me because, yeah, I didn't realize she achieved so much comparably because I thought Serena Williams, that she just dominated. So that would have been an interesting, we always talk about history, comparing players, athletes from different eras, but if Serena Williams would have played Steffi Graf, did they ever play?
Yeah.
I'm curious.
They're only 12 years apart.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if because that's the thing about tennis players, they get started really early.
Yeah, like 16.
Yeah.
Yeah, in February of '99, Serena Williams won her first singles title, Open in Paris. In March, she won her first WTA 1000 event at the Everett Cup in California, defeating Steffi Graf. So she beat Steffi Graf in a final.
Yeah, and how old was Steffi Graf at that time?
In '99, she would have been 30.
Oh, so she was still, that's interesting.
Yeah. Yes, she wasn't some 39-year-old player on the way out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny when you go through Serena Williams' Wikipedia page and you search for Graf in it. A lot of the times it's, Serena Williams did this thing that hadn't been done since Steffi Graf did it. So, and then it's like they say, 1 year, Serena Williams, 114th consecutive week, ranked number one, the third longest run in WTA history, behind Graf's 186 weeks. When she won the French Open in 2015, that Williams, she was only the third person in history to win each Grand Slam at least 3 times, the other being Margaret Court and Steffi Graf. Yeah. So it really is those 3. Margaret Court, I mean, but she was born in 1924 or whatever it was. So
yeah.
She was well before. But yeah, when it comes to Steffi Graf and Serena Williams, it's kind of picking somebody's flavor, really, instead of saying that one was so much better than the other. But from what I've watched of Steffi Graf and Serena Williams, I would argue that Steffi Graf was the better.
Yeah, so, it would have been an interesting match, both at their prime. Who would have won that match?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But different errors, just like the errors from Jimmy Connors, John McEnroe, Yvonne Lindell, and Mats Wilander compared to, well, really, this other generation is pretty much gone now. I mean, from your generation, what were the main players?
Nadal just retired.
Yeah.
Nadal, Federer, Djokovic.
Yeah.
Federer retired a year or 2 ago. Nadal just retired. Djokovic is still going, but he was the youngest of them. So
yeah, but my that generation back with when, like I said, John McEnroe, there'll never be another John McEnroe.
Yeah.
I mean, but yeah, that's news to me. That is news to me because I didn't realize Steffi Graf, did so much, man. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways,
Grand Slam.
Yeah, and she won 4 Grand Slams.
Yeah.
Wow, that's tough.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many players that they'll win like 3, but they can never win that 4th. And you know what? The toughest tournament is to win in the Grand Slam is the French.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one Grand Slam that always trips whatever player up because it's a clay court.
Yep. Yep.
It's a different surface, and it favors other players more than others. So because the thing about the clay surface is you slip a lot.
Yeah. Yep.
That's the problem with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for Steffi Graf to won it 4 times says a lot, man.
Yeah. And also, I will give her, since we're talking titles where, okay, Serena won one more than Steffi Graf. Steffi Graf is the only player, man or woman, in history to win the Golden Slam, which was in 1 year to win all 4 of the Opens and the Olympic gold medal.
Wow.
The only player to ever do it in 88. So somebody could argue that she had the greatest year in tennis history.
Yeah.
She won all 5 major titles. It doesn't get much better than that.
Wow. And that's men's or women's?
Yeah, it's men's or women's.
Yeah, so like I said, you argue when we talk about the greatest athletes in sports, you got to put Steffi Graf in there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was never done on the men's side. There was only 3 men that did the career Grand Slam, which was you win each of the 5 over the course of your career. But never in one single year. She was the only person to ever do it in one single year.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't realize, man. Yeah, that's news to me. Yeah, because at first, when you were talking before, we got talking between Serena Williams and Steffi Graf. I'm going, was it? Yeah, and then just clarifying, but wow. So Serena Williams, man. Yeah. She, I thought she was this dominant. Find out that wasn't the case.
Not so much. No.
Okay, so who else? So we were talking about before. So Steffi Graf was born today.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well there you go, man. There's a significant birthday.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
In the grand scheme of history, he's not that significant just because he was Chancellor of Germany a few months ago. Olaf Scholz was born.
Oh, really?
So, a former German chancellor, but one of the most unsuccessful. So,
yeah.
And in medical history, the man who would you say discovered Alzheimer's? Would that be the correct term? Identifying. Yeah. Alois Alzheimer, German. So significant Germans today. He identified the first case of Alzheimer's disease. So, in 1864. Well, he was born in 1864.
All right. So, I always kind of wonder what was the real difference between Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer.
Good question.
Because I mean, both are about memory loss, right? I mean,
maybe it's the part of the brain. Okay. So Alzheimer's is a later onset than Parkinson's. So that's one.
Okay.
Then Parkinson's can also disrupt motor behaviors, mobility, and everything, which isn't necessarily the case with Alzheimer's. And Parkinson's can be more of a dramatic or quicker progression than Alzheimer's. So,
all right.
It's in the symptoms and the speed. So, yeah.
Well, I know there's been some medical advancements in both Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. So,
yeah.
Hopefully, as I get older, is obviously as you get older. I mean, those are two of the things you worry about. Is memory loss. That's why they say you got to exercise your mind as well as your body.
It's all important. It all needs to be active.
So that's it as far as significant birthdays, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can almost say... oh, go ahead.
There is one more as far as American history. Harriet Beecher Stowe, the author of Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Wow, all right.
So...
yeah, that's a significant novel narrative. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, on the road to emancipating the slaves in the U.S. So,
so real quick, what they say was the like on Wikipedia, what they say is the significance of the narrative.
It was pretty much it just described the harsh conditions that slaves experience. Anti-slavery novel, published in 2 volumes. The novel had a profound effect on attitudes towards African Americans and slavery in the U.S. and is said to have, quote, helped lay the groundwork for the American Civil War. Yeah. She wrote the sentimental novel to depict the reality of slavery while also asserting that Christian love could overcome slavery. The novel focuses on the character of Uncle Tom, the long-suffering Black slave around whom the stories of the other characters resolve.
Yeah, and it takes on the cliche that the pen is mightier than the sword. When you think about that, this book, I mean, inspired or led to the Civil War. I mean, think about it.
Which is what, yeah, there's kind of a legend about the influence that the book has. It goes on to say, the influence attributed to the book was so great that a likely apocryphal story arose of Abraham Lincoln meeting Stowe at the start of the Civil War and declaring, so this is the little lady who started this great war.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's great to reflect on some of those incidences like that, because it just shows you that you could be right in something, but you never know how it could affect a whole culture, man. Some people probably write books and they're just kind of like never go anywhere or whatever, and then you could be just writing something and next thing
you're impacting millions.
Yeah. So those are some pretty significant. So Harriet, she was born today. Harriet Beecher.
Yes.
Yeah. So Steffi Graf and
here's the Mr. Alzheimer. Interesting fact about Uncle Tom's Cabin. It was the first American novel translated into Chinese. Yeah, 1901.
Yeah, that's one thing I don't know
by
about.
A man named Lin Shu.
Yeah, I know a little bit of the history of slavery in Russia. I don't know so much about China.
I don't know. I've never studied it.
Yeah, but maybe it was. I'm sure it was. I'm sure. I mean, most countries of some form of slavery existed.
Yeah, wherever there's imperialism, slavery is never too far behind.
Yeah.
That's the simple way to say it. Yeah.
So who knows? Maybe the novel had some impact in China. I don't know. Mm-hmm. That would be an interesting research topic right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
of course,
topic to add to the list.
Yeah, China is where it is today, so who knows?
Yeah.
But anyways, so as far because that's kind of cool for trying to see who was born today, and so what anything significant as far as history itself today?
There was, sticking with the American theme, do I still have that tab? What's the other one? Yeah, in 1777, the U.S. Continental Congress adopted the Stars and Stripes flag, replacing the Grand Union. So, a bit of American history, where one of the most famous flags in the world was born. On the other side, to stick with German history and the not so good side of it, Auschwitz opened.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. And
Yeah.
I was, even when I was in Poland, I was tempted to visit there, but we hadn't talked about that before. But for me, like I said many times before, it's different when you're actually there. It's tangible compared to like if you see pictures or you read about it. When you're actually standing in that place and you think about what happened there. When I was in Berlin, walking down the street and seeing pictures where Nazi soldiers were marching down, and to think, wow, I'm standing, and we talked about that before about space and time, right? That you're in the same space, just at a different time. So if you had a time machine and you could go back in time, or whatever, you would be standing in the same space where this stuff actually happened in history, man. And it's just, it's a different feel, and it definitely affects you in a different way.
Yeah. Or I guess a better way to describe the event was the first transport of people arrived at Auschwitz. Yeah, but yes. Yeah, it's an eerie feeling when you think about it that way.
Yeah, and having I took the train through the countryside in Poland, and it makes perfect sense why they did that. Obviously, I think if a majority of German citizens really realized what was going on, there definitely would have been a revolution or whatever. But obviously, taking them into Poland. And I think a majority, I don't know if there were any, I know that there were, I think, some camps in Germany itself, but most of the camps were outside of Germany, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There were a good number within Germany, but, well, because of the original, which were the detention camps for political prisoners and all that, then they expanded outwards. I'm gonna look this up to make sure I get this right. I'm trying to remember if there was actually death camps in Germany. I want to say yes. I just can't remember where exactly. They were, or were they just kept in Poland? My mind is split. I can't. No, not in Germany itself.
Yeah. You
just occupy Poland. Yeah.
Yeah. Poland was like the main place where they sent him out to is Poland, man.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
A lot of important histories here to learn and remember.
Yeah, one time I'm going to go visit there because I like Warsaw. Warsaw is a city. I mean, it's a nice city. Hopefully, it'll stay that way. Hopefully, things will work out where Eastern Europe won't get into a major conflict here. But I like to see Warsaw grow because that city is just it's a nice city, man, and. But it definitely, it's a city. Warsaw is one of those cities that's got a lot of dark history, man, through its whole history. And, it's easy to understand. They say Polish people are more downbeat, and but it's easy to understand why when you consider being under Soviet occupation and with everything that happened with Germany then, and then you look further in Poland's past, and yeah, it seems to be that way all through. Even when you get into Russia, it's just I don't know, man. But hopefully
people want their history back.
Yeah, they could keep moving forward and get out of that. Hopefully, there'll be some change in Russia over the next decade or whatever. But we'll see. Yeah. So what else happened? Anything else?
I had it ready. Argentina surrendering to the UK at the end of the Falklands War. The Falklands War. So
I remember that. Yeah. I remember when it was a crazy thing. I mean, we never in England they're going to take on Argentina. I go, well, where's this coming from? I remember when that happened. It's just like, yeah. But it didn't even last that long, did it? How long did that last?
It was 2 months.
Yeah.
It was 2 months, a week, and 5 days.
Yeah.
It wasn't even officially declared a war. It was just a conflict that just culturally got termed as a war.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's it, man, huh? Huh.
Yeah, I mean, as you can go on a bit, and there was some Soviet space missions were launched. There was, in separate years, some victories for Napoleon's armies in different parts of Europe. World War II, Harriet Beecher Stowe, Che Guevara, and Steffi Graf.
Yeah, like I said, I don't know much about how you pronounce Che.
Che, yeah.
Yeah, what's a little bit history behind him?
He was born in Argentina, and then he pretty much, this is a short way to say this, he traveled around South America. He was a medical student, and he developed this anger or frustration at kind of the conditions of poverty that he went into a lot of the times. And then there was this whole thing about, let me just make sure that I pull this right. There's something about the United Fruit Company. I remember that. As a young medical student, Guevara traveled throughout South America and was appalled by the poverty, hunger, and disease he witnessed. His burgeoning desire to help overturn what he saw as the capitalist exploitation of Latin America by the U.S. prompted his involvement in Guatemala's social reforms. Yeah, at some point he went to Guatemala under one of their presidents, and then that's what it was. Yeah, there's a whole situation with it, but essentially, there's this giant fruit company called the United Fruit Company, which was an American company that had over time acquired a lot of land to produce and sell fruits. It wasn't quite a monopoly, but it was getting there, and they had a bunch of control in different Latin American countries. And so when Guevara, he gets into Guatemala working with the president, and they're reforming things in a way that the United Fruit Company really didn't like. And so the United Fruit Company pretty much called the CIA and said, hey, we don't like what these guys are doing. And the CIA overthrew the government in Guatemala. And then he fled. He fled or he left Guatemala. Because he went to Mexico City, and that's where he met the Castro brothers, who were in exile from Cuba at the time. It's been years since I've studied the history.
Yeah.
Because they got involved in a movement in Mexico called the 26th of July movement, and Castro was exiled from Cuba, right? After participating in rebellions against right-wing governments in the Dominican Republic and Colombia, he planned to overthrow the Cuban president at the time, launching a failed attack on the barracks in 1953. Yeah, he was in prison. Then they describe as he traveled to Mexico, where he formed the revolutionary group, 26th of July movement. And then pretty much they staged their plan to go back to Cuba when they were in Mexico City. And it's one of those random facts or details in the story. They sailed back to Cuba on a yacht, which I never looked at how they got the yacht. I always forgot to look that up. But yeah, they sailed back to Cuba on a yacht with the intention of overthrowing the U.S.-backed dictator Batista. And then Guevara soon rose to prominence among the insurgents. He was kind of he was the second in command, but how it's kind of like on a ship where you have the first mate or something like that, where he's kind of really in the people. That's kind of what Che Guevara was. And yeah, he played a pivotal role in the 2-year guerrilla campaign, which eventually deposed the Batista regime. And then he had different roles in the government, including reviewing appeals and death sentences for those convicted as war criminals during revolutionary tribunals, land reform. Which he did as he was Minister of Industries. And he also, it says he spearheaded a successful nationwide literacy campaign as he was both president of the National Bank and instructional director for Cuba's armed forces, and traversing the globe as a diplomat on behalf of Cuban socialism. The guy, he did a lot in the government and everything. He had a foot for in every single part of it. And then, as a diplomat, like I said, such positions also allowed him to play a central role in training militia forces, or this was just as a government official as a whole, central role in training militia forces who repelled the Bay of Pigs invasion. And he also was instrumental in bringing Soviet nuclear-armed ballistic missiles to Cuba, which preceded and eventually precipitated the Cuban Missile Crisis. He was very important in the whole Cuban Revolution.
Yeah. So, I mean, part of me's confused about like Castro and all that. Why? Like I said, I just don't know. I mean, at some you would think that some people really supported Castro, but apparently a lot of people didn't like Castro. I mean, what is the deal with the particularly the Cuban community in like Florida? Because they're so anti-socialist in those areas. Like I'm no student of Cuba in their history, but it's kind of interesting to me why. Because Castro stayed in power for so long. What was the deal? How was Castro viewed?
I think well, obviously the Cuban community within the U.S. They certainly, the vast majority of them don't like him. I guess the simplest way I can describe it is that there are some people, far leftists, that look at what the Castro government and the Cuban Revolution did, and like they say, oh, they had this literacy campaign. There were a lot of people that couldn't read, and they improved education there and whatever. But at the same time, it was a state in which you couldn't express yourself. You couldn't. At the end of the day, we're still talking about Cuba, where, relatively speaking, even if some conditions were improved, you're still talking about a relatively poor country. And it's just like with the Soviet Union, where at some point resources became scarce because there were blockades and because the U.S. geographically was so close, blockading the country or restricting some things was easier for the U.S. to do. And since there was no way to petition the government or whatever, there were political prisoners and all of those different factors.
It's interesting because. All right, go ahead.
Guevara himself, he was eventually executed himself.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. But it just goes to show how if you close your door, you try to isolate yourself instead of working together. I just, it's amazing to me because whether if culture wants to adopt capitalism or communism or whatever it is that you want to adopt, in America, we teach that we should have tolerance for each other. And in this country, we have socialists, we have communists that live in this country too. And we're tolerant of that. But it seems like when another country, whether it's like Vietnam, and the majority of the country supports an ideology like communism, to be tolerant of that, to respect that if the country, if they vote in that and a majority of the people want it, then other countries should accept that and still work with those countries. But instead, we see time and time again where one country will go into another and try to you just talked about, overthrow the government to force people to adopt a philosophy that they don't want. And if you're a country that has the power to do it, you do it. And but I don't understand why it has to be that way. Why can't we just leave countries alone? And if they want to be a communist state, then okay. So why does that mean that we gotta consider them an enemy or a threat to us? No different than if you have a neighbor who's a communist or you're a capitalist. So what? I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're going to live in a democracy, you got to accept what a majority of the people vote in. And if it's a capitalist state or if it's a communist state, if that's what people want, then so be it, man.
Yeah, it's, to use a modern history example, it's the same premise as the war in Ukraine right now, where Russia has said, "Oh, well, we're only doing this to defend ourselves from Western aggression through NATO expansion." And because all of these countries keep signing up to join NATO, and that's threatening our security. But it gets to the point where, because after World War II, as a world, we pretty much all agreed that instead of solving our problems through, this is in theory, by the words that were spoken, but instead of fighting wars, we have things like the United Nations. We have rules. We have a rules-based order in which, if we have a problem with the way that a country is handling its affairs, then there's a protocol, there's a process in which we can handle it, instead of just going in and taking out the other government when they don't do something. But just like with Ukraine right now, where if the Ukrainian government, whoever's in charge of it at some point, says that, "Oh, we want to join NATO because we think it's the best thing for defense policies and national security," then under the current rules as they're written, they have the right to do that as an independent country.
Mm-hmm.
Just like on the other side of it, where with Vietnam or Cuba or something like that, where, well, Cuba was a revolution, Vietnam was more of a, there's a long history in Vietnam too about how they eventually got to the point of becoming a communist country. But that was more of a transition process. But if some country theoretically just wanted to adopt the system of communism, then a neighboring country, if Canada and the U.S. decide, "Oh, we want to be a communist and Marxist Leninist state," That doesn't mean that the U.S. just has the right to just go in and bomb Ottawa.
Right.
Just because they want to do that. Just because the U.S. says, oh, well, communist is a fundamental threat to capitalism or democracy or something like that. That doesn't mean you can just go and kill people. Yeah, it's something that was very popular after the end of World War II. It's like I talk about so many times about Iran and how the democratic government there was overthrown for the Shah and how that's created problems that have lasted literally until this day. But there needs to be, if you're going to have countries and you're going to have an international system based on rules, then you have to follow the rules.
Mm-hmm.
Or else we enter the more dangerous world of the rule of the strongest, the jungle, to use the politically philosophical term that a lot of people like to use. I would like to think that we can resolve our differences without invading the next country. That would be ideal. I don't think that's too crazy of a thing to say.
Yeah, I think about in the movie Octopussy, the James Bond movie. I remember in the one of the opening scenes where the Russian, I think they were all military. I think there were maybe some civilian leaders, but they were having that meeting. And of course, the one Russian general, he's going off. He says, well, we can make this lightning strike invasion of Europe and take it over. But the one Russian general, he stands up and tells him to sit down. But he says to him, he says, world socialism will be achieved peacefully. And it's kind of like that kind of philosophy that can make somebody, a leader in the United States, a little worried. So you're talking about spreading, ultimately achieving world socialism. And if you're a capitalist country, that's not something you want to hear. And that's where the fear comes from. So like whatever countries, they get invaded or a war starts, and then like in Vietnam where they'll get communist support or whatever, because that's her ultimate objective is to achieve world socialism. See, then both parties are guilty. You got one side that says, well, if we allow that there, it's gonna come here. So we got to stop it before it gets here. That's kind of like the philosophy.
Yeah, it's a philosophy all the time.
Yeah, and first of all, if we're going to live in a world of peace, having philosophies like, well, we're gonna ultimately achieve world socialism. No, that's not a good thing to say on the political front.
Yeah.
And if I remember the Communist Manifesto, Karl Marx, he states that in the manifesto, doesn't he, about the ultimate achievement of world communism?
Oh man, it's been a few years since I've read it, and it's only like 35 pages long.
Yeah. But I think he does state that in the manifesto about ultimately achieving world communism. But the thing with the manifesto is Marx just viewed it as just the ultimate repercussion of the effects of capitalism. Not so much that he was really calling for it. Obviously, he's calling for action, but I think he saw it more as an inevitable action. I don't know if I said that word right.
Yeah, inevitable.
Yeah.
It was, okay, this is the simplest way I can say it, is that Marx, he never kind of said that there would be, when you say like global communism or something like that, suggests that there was some sort of centralized authority, because it was more like, oh, there's communists in all of these different places, and at some point they will do these things, and then that will kind of lead to communism in the world.
Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah. Yeah, that's the better way to say it.
But regardless if it's the capitalist side or the communist, socialist, whatever else, because everybody has their philosophies that they could think they can justify or whatever. But I think as world leaders, you just need to continually progress to what works for best for everybody. That's the thing. And for leaders like communist leaders, certain ones, obviously we're not talking about individuals like Stalin or individuals like that, but that general idea of socialism to work alongside with capitalism and everything and try to formulate a system that works best for everybody. You would think that's at this point in our human evolution that we would be working towards that we would understand that there's some good ideas over here, good ideas over there. Let's throw them all on the table and see what works best for everybody and continue to work together. Because you would think that ultimately most people agree throughout the world that would want a world of total peace and that ultimately we would achieve a one world government.
It's cooperation is best. Cooperation prevents conflict. That's how I see it. Very simply. And so the greater level, the higher level in which you can build cooperation, then if people want to call that global government, then okay, yeah. It's just like the UN or the World Health Organization, the World Trade Organization, the International Monetary Fund, all these different international organizations. They're supposed to represent a global structure in which to coordinate actions throughout the world.
Mm.
And so, and in politics, there's the constant debate and conversation about, well, what should international organizations be able to do? How much power should they have? And then on the flip side of that, well, what powers are countries willing to give up to put into a higher organization? Which the answer right now, today, is countries don't like giving up their power in any sort of way. Because, yeah, the UN can't do anything without the approval of its member nations, just like the structures in other organizations. But we have a global structure without executive power, without legislative power. They're more just places to discuss things. So it's a question for all of these countries, like we're talking about. It's a question where do they want to give up their personal power within the halls of their own parliaments or presidents' offices and chancellors, prime ministers, and whatever else to members of a global parliament or legislation? Well, that's something that they have to figure out for themselves.
Yeah.
In the end, because everybody seems to be against bureaucracy. Why have 1, 2, 3 levels of government when moving on completely different tracks? But at least you could streamline them. That would seem to be a helpful thing to do.
Yeah, and I was just thinking a couple of things here. First of all, yeah, I mean, if you feel your way is right, why would you want to give up the power? But here's the kicker. I just thought of this. Because in America, and like a lot of places in Europe, you have democracies, you're able to vote, and that's what we're all about. What if we got the world leaders together, the top world leaders, because they're all going to say, like in Russia, like in well, I'm not so much sure about China or whatever, but most countries, they say, okay, let's put a vote to it. Let's just have a world vote, the whole population of the world, and they're going to vote in what a majority of the people support, and then all the countries agree that we're going to adopt that. And who's going to be first on board with that is China and India.
Yeah, because they have the numbers. Huh?
They'll say, all right, let's do a world vote. And in America, right, we're all about democracy, and we're going to abide by what a majority vote in. So let's have a world vote, and for world leaders to agree, okay, whatever the world vote is, we'll adopt that system. And then the world leaders and people can vote for the world leaders, the world governments. How would that even work? Because first of all, how many honest governments are there in the world?
Well, yeah, very, very few. Very few.
What's the one leader in?
That's the whole other thing.
Belarus, right? What?
Lukashenko.
Yeah, what percentage of the vote does he get every election? Is it like 99.9?
Like 98 on a bad year. Or Paul Kagame in Rwanda, who wins by like 99.17%.
Yeah.
Yeah, those guys. And even if you did propose that, the powers that be in the different governments, they would just try to interfere with the process as much as possible to make sure that they kept their position in the country.
Because to start with, North America and Europe would be at a severe disadvantage with that. But that's the reality, because we want fair representation for all people. So everybody should matter equally. So if India and China and what other countries that have the high populations, that's their every person should have a fair say. And in America, we have a population less than 500 million compared to China, which I don't know what in India, what their population is total now, but including Africa. And I don't even know. Yeah. But ultimately, that's the way it would be anyways. I mean, if we were going to progress and keep moving towards a one world government, it would have to be a worldwide vote all the time. So what do you think if you did have theoretically a fair election throughout the world, what do you think, what form of social economic system would people vote for?
That's a complicated question. I know I can say this. If you're talking about just the pure numbers of the world and what people would look at doing, because in a lot of ways, this is kind of creating a stage for people to reset the entire global governance, they would say that the majority of people, because we're talking about Southeast Asia, we're talking about Africa, we're talking about even a large portion of the populations in Central and South America, they would look at a redistribution of wealth and supply chains in the global economy. Because they would say, why is it that so many private companies from primarily North America, China now, the Middle East, and Europe, why do they control so many of the most valuable economic sectors within our countries? And so there would be a push to nationalize, or at the very least, have those things taken over by private companies within the individual countries. So for the Americans, that sounds like communism. That sounds like socialism.
Yeah.
But I would, without using those labels, I would say that there would be, most people would vote for economic redistribution. Massive economic redistribution. Not even in the sense like it's mostly talked about in the US, where there's the leftists that say that, oh, reparations to this country or that country for something that was done at some point in the past, which, relatively speaking, is much less money than the value and the production of economic sectors in today's, literally in today's world. So there would be a push for massive redistribution and repossession of supply chains, factories, mining, farming rights, all of those different things.
Yeah, to me, it would be a double-edged sword. Because what would the impact be here in the United States compared to a country like North Korea? Because one of the first things people would obviously people want freedom. No matter what country you're in, people would want to be free, and they would want fair representation, regardless of the economic system you're in. So for like America, yeah, it would be, the quality of life would definitely change here, but so would it be in other countries that have it. Countries like North Korea, my gosh, where people, you can even talk about the Middle East, right? I mean, how would that affect the Middle East? All of a sudden, if you have a one world government and a one world police force, military, and so on, the feuding that goes on in the Middle East would cease. So it's a double-edged sword for people in Europe, in America, Canada, and countries like that. Yeah, it'll be, wow, a drop down of quality of life for sure. There's no doubt. But what it would mean in areas like the Middle East would be totally opposite. I think it would be really positive in that regard. So it's definitely, it would be a give and take situation. But the biggest issue in all of it would be is to make sure that you assure a fair vote. That would be the toughest task in all of it.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that there's a recent thing in political philosophy, as far as it's kind of even what it carries on from the idea after World War II of exporting democracy throughout the world to places that are dictatorships or authoritarian or totalitarian, whatever they may be. And so you go in, and in a lot of cases, you overthrow the government, or you put an intense pressure to reform the places, either economically, militarily, whatever it may be. But there's kind of this building counter to that argument, where you can essentially go in, blow the doors off, and then put in a democratic government in a country, in a society that's never had democracy before. And then eventually people will adjust their behaviors into a democratic form. But and as I read more I think more about it and I read more, there's the new philosophy that says democracy only works, or it works most of the times, if you have underlying conditions that sustain democracy. So it's like we're talking about respecting one country's decisions to do certain things or join certain pacts and all of that, and other people have to listen to that or respect it, or in other words, tolerance. We're talking about international tolerance. But just like with democracy on a national level, you have to have internal tolerance to say that, okay, if we all have this election, if we're a country of 30 million people, and this is our first democratic election, is there the social value of tolerance to where even if those people over there end up voting 60-40 against you, and you're in the minority and you don't technically have the power, in a government, is 40% of the country willing to accept the role as the minority? And because if there's not, because if you have a huge section of the population that says that we don't want people that think like that, or we don't want people in government that will do those things, and then that can also merge into things about ethnicity or race or religion, and saying that, oh, well, of course, so many people voted this way because they are those people, then you will have internal conflict much sooner than you will have stable democratic government. And so whether or not it's an international or a foreign country coming in and trying to push democracy, there's no foundation to build it on. And so when it comes to kind of this idea of a global vote, because that's a trend throughout the world in the last 15, 20 years now. Yeah, 20, 25, 15, 20 years, where democracy has backslid in a lot of places. Most of the world doesn't live in a free, fair, democratic system. And that's not to say that all places want democracy either. So it's a very difficult thing, as I see it right now, to say that, okay, we're going to have a literal, global, all-inclusive global democracy, because then it's like in different countries, even the democratic countries. Okay, well, what's the age to vote? Is it 18? Is it 21? That's a different value. Who can run? There's different qualifications for candidates in different countries. What is considered proper election oversight for the system that people use to vote? There's, even within democracies, there are different values on how it works, and then the structure of government and all of those things. It's an idealistic proposition. I think that the world would be much better off if there was greater global coordination and stronger international institutions. But there's a lot of barriers to that in the first place. And I can certainly say that there's no government, whether it's democratic or authoritarian, non-democratic, that it's high enough of a priority on their agenda right now, to where they have a fully thought out package of actions to where that can be more likely to happen and succeed. So for now, it's a work in progress at the very least.
Yeah,
more at the national level.
Yeah, I don't think it's a work in progress right now. I mean, that's where it's like Devo, man. Right now, I mean, because it seems like we're just moving backwards instead of forwards. But the point I'm trying to make is, yeah, it's more of a dream than reality. But the point I'm trying to make is that we should be moving towards it. Like I always said about perfection, there's no such thing as perfection, but that doesn't mean it's something that we shouldn't strive for. We should always strive to better ourselves, to better a system or whatever. And on the world front, you would like to think in this millennium or this new century that most people would be on board with that, and they're not, man. I mean, it's for whatever reason. I mean, we could go down the list as far as whatever reason, but it's disheartening at one point, because if you have a vision, and this goes kind of like back, we were talking about Harriet Beecher Stowe and her book, how much that can impact, and even like the Communist Manifesto. These narratives, the impact that they had on the global level, but there's never been a narrative that's reached globally, that's really maybe on the religious front, where they're talking about Christianity or Islam or whatever. In some regards, it seems that religion has more of an impact than political philosophy. But where do you begin? That's the thing. And I always say you start with good leaders, and unfortunately, you don't even have that. You don't have the leaders in place to even begin to work towards a one world government. That would be ideal for everybody. I mean, and then we can focus on more important issues like expanding further into space. Because, like I said, the solar system, this planet, it's not going to be here forever. And yeah, we have billions of years in that regard, but you never know what's going to happen tomorrow.
No.
And we could be achieving so much today if we were working together. The governments were working. Man, we could be so much ahead where we are right now. I mean, I have no doubt. Like in space exploration, if Russia, if China, the United States, if all the major players were working together, our space program would be so more far advanced where it is. We'd probably have a station on the moon. We probably already had a mission to Mars already.
Mm-hmm.
But because we continue to be divided, and we continue to make this a competition, and because of people's traditions and heritages, and the religion and these factors, it just slows us down, man. And to a point where we're actually starting to move a little bit backwards instead of forward. And that's the really disheartening thing about it all.
Yeah, it comes in pushes and pulls, because it's the simple example, since global governance really isn't that old of a concept in terms of practical action. You have World War One, the end of World War One, and then you had some leaders in some places that wanted to build the League of Nations, and they wanted to give certain powers to the League of Nations and have some sort of structure that in theory, prevented wars and all of that. And the perfect conflict was between Woodrow Wilson and the U.S. Congress, where eventually the U.S. didn't join the League of Nations because different people said, we don't really want to give up authority to a higher power. And so there were some leaders in place in the U.S. that wanted to go that way, and then other leaders throughout the world that also wanted to create this new thing that never existed before. But then there were just enough people in the right places that didn't. And so then the League of Nations became weakened. And then that was one of the things that created the conditions for World War II. And then at the end of World War II, so the lessons of the past were learned, and the UN was formed and all of those different things. But as we come to see 80 years later, after the end of World War II, there weren't enough people over the last 8 decades to create a system that made guardrails strong enough to prevent conflicts. And so now here we are. But 80 years later, with the system badly in need of reform, or maybe a complete overhaul, depending on how somebody wants to look at it, there's no leaders in place, not even to have that conversation about, well, where do the reforms need to happen? Or maybe we need to get rid of this and replace it, or just build from the ground up. There's nobody with those large scale ideas. And that's where a lot of, that's where a ton of the problem lies, is that lack of leadership.
Yeah. So going back to Castro and Cuba, because that's how we got into this conversation, but being tolerant of each other and just accepting whatever country, whatever economic system they adopt, because in the end, it's just an economic system. You may not like the way they live or whatever else, but you can go live where you want to live. I mean, it's I don't know, but that's the thing. Like we saw in Cuba, like we see in Russia and in China, there was some individuals that looked around and go, "Man, this sucks. We got to do something about it." Mm-hmm. And that's what I want to talk about was we were talking about Cuba in exile, and it just made me realize again about Navalny. Is that Navalny? How he went, when he went back into Russia, is like, why? Because when you look at what happened, like with Castro and other leaders, they always went into exile, but then they would come back and lead a revolution or whatever. That's why what he did was so stupid. I mean, that's the only way I can describe it. I go, that was just stupid to do. Because what was that going to achieve?
Sometimes you have to wait a long, long time.
Yeah. And history has shown time and time again how an individual can go back after being, whether they fled the country or whatever, and they went back and they led a revolution or whatever. I mean, that's the way to do it. Yeah. You wait for the time, you wait for the opportunity to go in there and do that.
Yeah, I mean, in somewhat modern history, in terms of waiting a long time, probably the greatest length of time and the most effective was the Iranian Revolution. I mean, Khomeini, he was in exile for 15 years. I mean, and eventually the conditions were right in Iran, in which he came back in and helped the revolution. Whether or not people like what he did or whatever, I mean, it's to the point of Navalny. Khomeini, he could have said, "Oh yeah, I'm not waiting 2 years. I'm going back in now." Well, he probably would have been killed. So he understood the time to act. Unfortunately, he wanted to install a theocratic dictatorship and everything. But this is where we talk about Machiavellian philosophy. And sometimes you have to learn from the bad people in history. Instead of, just saying, well, I'm going to make myself, I'm going to make a statement by going back and showing my bravery. Well,
yeah,
I get it. I get it. Sometimes you want to go in guns blazing. But if you're just going to fly back in on a commercial airplane and just get arrested and marched out, that's not exactly going out in the blaze of glory.
Yeah, Putin must have been laughing his head off when he did that.
Yeah,
I get the show of how you would say it, but I would tell him that is not the thing to do, man. You just learn from history, wait it out, wait for your opportunity, and then go in, man. But sure enough, there was no doubt when you heard about him going back into Russia. I said that's the end, man. You'll never hear from this guy again. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened, man.
Yeah.
And then his wife is going around the country. She wrote a book and she's doing these little no, that's not the way you're going to get things done.
Yeah, it's just like, and we're running out of time, but it's just like with, I saw Greta Thunberg and her great idea to help the people of Gaza raise awarenesses because she sails around on the ship to avoid climate emissions, greenhouse emissions. And they took this ship with some aid to try to sail to Gaza to highlight everything that's going on there. She just got arrested. She didn't do anything. I mean, and then at the Israeli government, they actually made a joke of her and everything. they started putting pictures of her on her flight back because, oh, look, she's flying now. So if that's your grand idea to spark change in the world, it's not enough. It's not.
Yeah.
That's not how. That's not how it works.
Go ahead.
There are people in history that provide some blueprint for change, revolution in the most extreme sense. Don't set yourself up to get killed or be useless.
Yeah, exactly. You got to do a lot. You got to do. It's like Xi in China. I mean, before he took power. I mean, look at what that guy did. I mean, it's just. It's easy to see how he rose to power the way he did. Oh, yeah. So, and he did it like on the like a lot of these leaders did. They do it at the grassroots level. They do a lot of traveling. They gain a lot of support at the grassroots, and they get a rep going. But it's through force. I mean, well, I wouldn't say so much that about Xi, but yeah, you got to have the means to do it, and the means isn't just about a lot of talking, man. I mean, it's about action too. So,
yeah, exactly.
But anyways, so that's what happened today on the historical front, and it's
lessons.
Yeah, meaning and impact. Uncle Tom's Cabin. The Communist Manifesto.
Cuban revolutionaries.
And it takes you to what Captain Kirk told Spock in, what was the episode? Oh, Mirror, Mirror. Yeah. What do you tell Spock?
At the beginning of every revolution, there's one man with a vision.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I was just saying that, but what did Spock tell him right after that?
I shall consider.
No.
Oh, well, he said something to the effect of what you're suggesting would get me killed.
No. He said that I got to have the means to do it.
Oh.
Remember? Mm-hmm. And then what did Kirk?
Yeah.
And then what did Kirk tell him? He goes, in my office.
Oh yeah, there was something.
The button.
Yeah.
That he could use to zap his opponents.
Mm-hmm.
Remember?
Yep.
And then that's when Spock said, Captain Kirk, I shall consider it. Because Kirk showed him the opportunity where he could do it.
Yeah.
So that says a lot about what we were just talking about, how individuals can go on exile and how once they have the means to do it, and then they take advantage of it. And that's what you got to look for. You got to look for your opportunity. It's just like what we were talking about here over the last election. I said, for right now, it's their time. Mm-hmm. It's their time. They won, and that's just the way it is. But the only thing we can do right now is wait. That's the best thing to do, and wait for our opportunity to get things back on track. There's a time in every battle, in every fight. Sometimes you got to retreat. You got to regroup, and then get back in the fight. But it's a stupid thing to keep fighting when it's a losing cause. If the battle's lost, man. When we talk about Waterloo and we talk about the Duke of Wellington, they were at that point. I mean, that Wellington, it looked like they were going to lose it, but it wasn't until the Prussians arrived at the very end that changed the course of the battle. But I wasn't at Waterloo or exactly what happened, but I'm sure at some point Wellington would say, we need to get out of here. We need to retreat, regroup, or whatever. Unless something dynamic can happen, like happened there, with the Prussians, but there comes a time where you just got to retreat, sit back, and wait for your opportunity.